our business, it's about information, and information has to be reliable to be considered useful.
I had failed miserably in keeping my child safe. I did the total opposite, just by misinformation, mistrust. We didn't know whether he was going to live or die.
My job is to write about the one plane that takes off and blows up midair and kills 100 people.
It appeared that it was safer when I was a kid than it is now.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore.
We've created this problem. We've also created the solution. They're just living together, and we can't tell them apart.
The internet changed everything. This is something that has never, ever occurred in the history of the human race.
Every day, over 1 billion people go online to find information.
The time that human beings spend on the internet is time that is being bought by advertisers and by companies who want to sell advertising. And that's the model of the internet. The most powerful places on the internet are run by ad sales.
The more you click, the longer you're on their platform, the more money they make. While people turn to social media for news, platforms are not designed to give you reliable information. High-profile tech insiders have raised a red flag to say that social media platforms are designed to hook you.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. It's a social validation feedback loop because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
Some programmers call it brain hacking, and the tech world would probably prefer you didn't hear about it.
It was happening for years before a few engineers blew the whistle.
This thing is a slot machine. Every time I check my phone, I'm playing the slot machine to see what did I get. This is one way to hijack people's minds, to form a habit. What you do is you make it so when someone pulls a lever, sometimes they get a reward, an exciting reward. And it turns out that this design technique can be embedded inside of all these products.
Do you think parents understand the complexities of what their kids are dealing with when they're dealing with their phone, dealing with apps and social media?
No, and I think this is really important. Your telephone in the 1970s didn't have 1,000 engineers on the other side of the telephone who were redesigning it to work with other telephones and then updating the way your telephone worked every day to be more and more persuasive. That was not true in the 1970s.
The infinite scroll keeps users on longer. Search engines like Google and YouTube are also scheming to keep you engaged.
When you hit play on that YouTube video, what actually happens is that it wakes up a little avatar voodoo doll version of you. Inside of Google server somewhere, based on all your clicks, based on all your likes, based on everything you've watched, all those clicks, which is making this voodoo doll look and act more and more like you. We just have to manipulate the voodoo doll. We test a bunch of videos on him, and we say which one's gonna keep you here the longest.
These clips are from a video that was viewed over 1 billion times.
Johnny, that really hurt. Johnny bit me.
You start one video and then they'll have that timer, but it's only like 5 seconds long for the next one to begin. It'll be something that you're interested in because the software is studying you. So it's like, oh, if you like this video, you'll like this one, and we'll play it next. And you don't have any time to click out.
Hey, Ron. Hey, Billy.
The next time you look up, it's like 10, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, an hour later, and all you meant to do was just check one thing.
I have thrown my phone into the woods before, but then I immediately ran after it because I was like, wait, someone's gonna call me soon. So, yeah, it could be considered an addiction.
Recommendation engines can increase people's likelihood of encountering more extreme forms of anything: violence, sexuality, other kinds of media content.
On YouTube, if you did a search about diets, you'd be recommended anorexia videos, because those would be more likely to grab your attention. If you were watching a news clip about 9/11, it would recommend conspiracy videos next. And now that you've been identified by the algorithm as someone interested in conspiracies, YouTube's recommendations would begin to feed you an endless supply of conspiracy videos. Some of these conspiracies and hoaxes reached a surprisingly wide audience.
You may think it sounds crazy, but in 2017, thousands, if not millions of people still believe the world is flat. And the number of people who think so is growing.
With over 1 billion hours watched daily on YouTube, over 70% are from the recommendations. Most people don't realize this when choosing to give their kids a cell phone.
Why do you all need cell phones?
Safety.
Emergency.
Safety. Educational.
The second I finish a sentence and I'm giving a lecture notes, they're on their phones. Like, they can't even have that separation for that 5 seconds for me to take a breath. Or if they're in a group and someone else is writing, they're on their phones. Have you ever watched a teenager scroll on their phone? They do it so quickly that I rarely see a student stop and read the caption. They're just scrolling. If there's a video, they'll watch the video for maybe 2 seconds and then they'll keep scrolling. I would say probably 70% of their day. That's what I would call kind of nonsense.
And people would text each other and they'd be right next to each other. And I didn't understand it, but I was like, I guess that's what I should be doing too.
I use my phone 6 hours per day on social media.
I probably spend like 3-ish hours on my phone a day, like for entertainment.
It was like 8 hours a day. It was like horrible. It was always Snapchat.
Today's a special day because me and my best friend hit a 1,000-day Snapchat streak on Snapchat.
Your streak on Snapchat, if you go so long without posting something, then you lose your streak, and kids care about that. We have them put their phones away. But what about my streak? I think it's changed the relationship students have with each other.
Kids in high school intentionally spread rumors that are false. They spread the rumors to make fun of others.
School fights like this are showing up on social media sites every day.
It was already a mean enough time going to a middle school and high school back in the day. Now throw gasoline on the fire and throw a phone in there. The bullying doesn't stop when the last bell rings.
When there's like a rumor going around, say Friday night, and then over the weekend, when you're on social media, the subject still pops up.
Kids don't have an ability to escape from that. They're always connected.
Kids are saying things that you would never say to somebody face to face. Things like, go kill yourself, nobody likes you. You should just go die. We've had a number of young people, middle school age, high school age, commit suicide here in Durango. It's happened way too many times.
We're all sensitive to emotion. Humans are hardwired to pay attention to messages that create strong emotion, from fear to lust to desire to hate.
The fake news stuff that I was doing as Alan Montgomery, my pseudonym, this was just something I was doing on the side with some friends that I knew online. It was totally just for fun. We were, I guess, trolls in a lot of sense, really just pushing buttons. I bought all the domains that were like NewYorkTimes.com.co, WashingtonPost.com.co. Once we started to get traction, then advertisers came to us. And then before you knew it, the paradigm kind of shifted to, oh, well, there's a lot of money to be made here. Why don't we just see what we can do as far as driving traffic, just getting engagement, just watching those page views grow. Anything that you can mask behind a study is great. For example, like say that you were pro ice cream, and I came along and I said, you know what, ice cream is bad for your health. You wouldn't like that story. You'd be like, you know what, I'm not gonna read that story. That says something that I don't believe in. But if I read a story that says that if you have ice cream every day of your life, then you're gonna live 20 years longer. Then that's like, oh yeah, see, I knew I was right about that ice cream thing. I'm gonna eat ice cream. I'm gonna eat 2 scoops of ice cream and live 40 years longer. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter.
Scientists say that's because of confirmation bias, where you look for and find confirming evidence for what you already believe, and you ignore or rationalize disconfirming evidence. All of us do it. Each user is tracked, our clicks recorded, our biases noted to calculate and present to us what we're most likely to click on next. Each of us is slowly retreating into a world of our own, separate from a shared reality.
People want to believe that they're right, and if they see something that confirms their worldview, they will share it.
Disinformation spreads further and faster when it makes us afraid or angry. A Pew Research Center survey showed that a majority of Americans have shared false information. Some tech design has made this easier than ever. Twitter's retweet button puts sharing information, true or false, to hundreds or even thousands of people just one click away. It has effectively become a fear and outrage button. Read something scary? Retweet it. Something that makes you angry? Retweet it. The leader of the team that created the retweet button said that it was like handing a 4-year-old a loaded weapon.
If you're scrolling through your newsfeed and you happen to land upon this thing, we wanted you to click on it and not just read it, but be so outraged that you had to share it to all your friends.
And the problem is it becomes this race to the bottom of the brainstem, where if I go lower on the brainstem to get you, using my product, I win, but it doesn't end up in the world we want to live in.
It appeals to the worst of human nature. It's like taking all of our hate and our fear, fanning the anger, fanning our fears, and creating an us against them.
That in turn sells more ads for Facebook, which leads to more profit for their investors.
The world is getting pushed and pulled apart, and yet people don't know they're being manipulated.
And it often starts in anonymous spaces on the web. It then moves into closed or semi-closed networks. It then moves into conspiracy communities online. It then moves into more traditional social media spaces. And then, unfortunately, sometimes it ends up on mainstream media.
So this is one of the paradoxes of the information revolution. We thought that it would mean more information, better research, more access to facts, better democracy. Actually, it's causing this chaos.
This was one of the most shared news stories on Facebook in 2019. If you had kids, or you knew someone with kids, it felt like the article was meant for you.
So the key part of that headline is maybe in our neighborhood. It's the immediacy. So something that is an immediate threat to me and my family, that's what I care about. Headline writers know this intuitively.
The post was shared hundreds of thousands of times, even though it was written for residents of a small town in Texas.
Kids are more afraid to go places, and we're more afraid to let them into these unknown places.
All I knew was come home before the street lights come up. I had freedom. My kids don't have that freedom. We don't allow that freedom because it's just out of fear that something could happen to them right now.
It appeared that it was safer when I was a kid.
One of the great ironies about the present is that just as we have been getting safer and safer, parents are more and more vigilant about the safety of their children, sometimes far above the actual realities of where the dangers lie. We're fragile creatures, we're vulnerable, things can go wrong. It makes sense that our emotions would be tuned to things that go wrong more than things that can go right.
That's called our negativity bias, where negative things have a bigger impact on how we feel and behave than positive things.
I genuinely believed it was unsafe to vaccinate. I wouldn't even consider injecting my children with anything because I felt that it would cause damage and harm to my children.
I didn't know either way, so I went to the internet to Google and try and get information. This guy, Andrew Wakefield, who's very famous now, Dr. Andrew Wakefield, he got published in Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical publication, that he found this link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
It's a dilemma. The MMR vaccine will protect you against measles, mumps, and rubella. But today, questions about the vaccine.
Research published today suggests MMR vaccination could be linked to a new side effect, a combination of bowel disease and autism.
That autism link is the thing that scared me the most. She was really adamant about it. So it was, no way, are we vaccinating our kids? Okay, you know, so, and I get all this information. So it was a joint decision, really, and I was sort of on board. Yeah, vaccines are harmful, so let's not do it.
We went to a Christmas party on the Sunday and we had a great time. Monday morning, Elisha woke up with one side of his face hanging, you know, sunken. So of course I thought, oh my God, has he had a brain tumor? What's going on? So I took him to the GP. And the GP said he's got Bell's palsy, which is paralysis of the facial nerve, which usually just goes on one side of the face. There's nothing you need to do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. It just needs to take its course, and it takes about 6 weeks, and then he'll be right again. Next day, he was getting worse. That night, he started to bite his tongue. Now, because Elisha's born with special needs, it was very hard for us to get him to explain what was going on, to tell us what was happening. I see. Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? Yeah, okay. He had showed me in the weekend a little cut under his foot. So I took him to Starship, which is the children's hospital. And on that Thursday afternoon, his jaw started to lock up. So late, 10 o'clock at night, a new doctor came on and looked at him and said, I wonder if it's tetanus. And I said, I've had the same thought.
If you Wikipedia tetanus, the picture is a guy and his whole body is arched.
So the nerves are being damaged and sending wrong signals to the brain, and the brain then reacts by spasming muscles. And those muscles spasm are so strong that, you know, they're arching you and can break your bones and everything. And at the same time, your jaw is locked up completely, so it restricts your airways. And that's one of the reasons people die of it, is because they strangle you. All night, he was cramping every 3 minutes. And I kept pushing the emergency bell. I said, you gotta come and help me, you gotta come and help me. This is not right. He was biting his tongue, bleeding down, arching, and, you know, all of this. It was just absolutely horrendous. And then at, I think, 6 o'clock in the morning, he looked at me and he goes, Mummy, Mummy, save me. And it was just the worst thing ever because I couldn't save him. There's nothing I could do. They said the only way to alleviate his pain is to put him into coma. We said goodbye to him because we never knew if he was going to come out of coma. They said, we think he needs to be in a coma for a long time, so we want to do a tracheostomy because it's better for his vocal cords and all sorts of things.
The spasms were still happening. but at least he wasn't conscious of the pain anymore.
In 1998, Dr. Andrew Wakefield published a report suggesting that there was a link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
The backlash against Wakefield was significant, public, and damning.
Well, Dr. Wakefield has been shown used absolutely fraudulent data. He had a financial interest in some lawsuits. He created a fake paper.
Though Wakefield's paper was retracted by the medical journal that had published it, it gave birth to a modern anti-vaccination movement among parents. Many chose not to vaccinate their children.
The problem was it started a firestorm. Hundreds of children in the United Kingdom and Ireland were hospitalized. 4 children were killed by measles virus, a virus that could have been safely and easily prevented by vaccinations.
You could argue that that paper killed 4 children.
We didn't know whether he was going to live or die.
Oh, watch out for your toes.
Elijah's going for his first walk. I had failed miserably in keeping my child safe. I thought that the biggest safety I could give my child was to not vaccinate him. I would then prevent him from getting autism or brain damage or any of the other things that we'd read about on the internet by not vaccinating. I thought that was the safest, but I realized there that that was the most unsafe thing I could have done. The safest thing I could have done was to immunize my child against those totally preventable diseases.
So Elijah having a walk out of the hospital, learning to walk again, and doing his favorite thing in all the world, which is chasing birdies with Mummy's help.
The guilt and the shame that we went through, and for me personally, still going through, was immense.
And it was very obvious when your son's in a coma and has a 10% chance of dying that perhaps you could have got some better information.
If you care about your children, then you are a group that can be targeted. You could write something that would say, hey, if your kids watch too much TV, if they're on their devices too long, if you did this during pregnancy, if you don't do this during pregnancy, then certainly that could cause you to have a reaction to that content, to share it with your friends or family.
So there you are, you're about to join a Facebook group. Let's say it's a new mom's Facebook group. It wakes up the avatar voodoo doll version of you, and it says, which of these groups, if I got you to join them, would keep you there the longest, would be most engaging? And what do you think one of the most popular groups of mine was? Anti-vaccine conspiracy theories.
It is important, regardless of your profession or your standing in life, to have the proper information so you can make informed choices. I think everyone wants to know the truth.
How can you know what to trust? On September 11th, 2014, a chemical factory explodes in Louisiana. Social media lights up with videos and commentary, and news sites apparently post reports about the accident. ISIS takes responsibility in a video, and local residents receive text messages about a spreading cloud of toxic fumes. The problem was, there had been no explosion. The videos were fake, and so were the news websites that reported it. It was all a hoax, perpetrated by the Internet Research Agency, a Russian organization in St. Petersburg. The Internet Research Agency employs hundreds of young Russians to spread pro-Russian and anti-American propaganda on the internet. They're widely referred to as trolls. One of their tactics is to pretend to be Americans on social media, registering thousands of new accounts using false information. Though Vladimir Putin has denied overwhelming evidence linking him to the operation, he did say this.
Хакеры же люди свободные, как художники. Они, значит, настроение у них хорошее, они встали с утра и занимаются тем, что...
One of them, Vitaly Bespalov, quit so that he could tell the world what was going on.
У меня на столе несколько сим-карт.
В России они стоят около $3 на русские деньги, на рубли. Это сим-карты, которые мы вставляем в свой телефон, звоним, пользуемся ими, и которые необходимы для регистрации во всех социальных сетях. Одну из них мы уже извлекли, установили в старый телефон Samsung, для того, чтобы постоянно менять сим-карты и делать новые аккаунты.
Trolls know how to take advantage of our psychological vulnerabilities.
Мы регистрируем аккаунт. Лучше делать это от лица девушки, потому что девушкам больше доверяют, по крайней мере в России. Думаю, в США тоже. Да. Мобильный телефон. Вот для чего мы установили сим-карту. Приходит код. Все, нужно придумать пароль. На принципе все равно. Все, мы создали фейковый аккаунт. Как мы видим, на это ушло буквально 3 минуты. Даже, может, меньше.
One thing they did was create protest events in America. There was an event in Texas where they organized pro-Muslim and anti-Muslim rallies on the same day, literally across the street from each other. They created a Facebook event and got people to like it. Before you know it, there are two groups of real people in a tense face-off on a street corner in Texas.
One of the things that we believe may have been part of the intent of organizing simultaneous rallies, same day, same place, opposite sides of the street, was probably to attempt to provoke violence.
And you can go back as far as the spoken word, people have lied, right? So none of this is new. What's new is the speed and pace at which this misinformation can spread, one, and malicious attempts by bad actors to deliberately trick you.
The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country. Anything. Put white against black, old against young, I don't know, wealthy against poor, and so on. Doesn't matter. As long as it disturbs society, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation, it's good.
Outside forces recognize that racism is a vulnerability in the United States that can be exploited.
African Americans were the group targeted most by Russian trolls in 2016. One technique was to start making positive comments about the African American community, how beautiful the women are, how rich the cultural history is. Then, once the troll account gains a following, they start slipping in more and more toxic content focused against other groups of people. That's where the bots come in. Thousands of fake social media accounts run by automatic computer programs post and repost these messages to make it look like there's a groundswell of support. U.S. intelligence believes that Russian agents created Facebook groups like Blacktivist, which reposted videos of police beatings, or another, Secured Borders, which posted anti-immigrant messages. Some of the fake accounts encouraged people to join protests, and then Russian-funded media covered the protests to emphasize divisions. The goal? To make Americans see each other as enemies. As trust in each other and in the government goes down, fear goes up, and the stability of the country is at risk.
You could think of this as a social cohesion attack to try and drive wedges into the American public where maybe a little wedge or a piece of history in our past is being exploited to make 21st century America look more like 1950s America than it ought to.
If it is true that a Russian-created activist group is indistinguishable from an American-created activist group, that will have negative impacts on our ability to create social movements that are positive, that actually benefit ourselves and not some sort of foreign power.
How did Facebook somehow not make the connection that electoral ads paid for in rubles were coming from Russia?
Facts are essential to democracy. When our information supply is polluted, ultimately our democracy starts to crumble.
The American definition of covert action, activities designed to influence foreign, political, military, or economic events in which it is intended that the hand of our government be hidden. That's a perfect definition of what the Russians just did to us. This is the most successful covert influence campaign in recorded history.
Hello. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about a new technology that's affecting famous people. Remember when Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonated himself?
Get out of this, the bomb in there, get out!
Deepfake, deepfake, Deepfake.
Gotta be kidding.
This is a deepfake too. I'm not Adele, but I am an expert in online manipulation.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time. But how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of dystopia. Thank you. Stay woke, bitches.
What used to take a Hollywood special effects company weeks to pull off can now happen in minutes using inexpensive software.
And you can make them say whatever you want. Yes, absolutely. We already know there are fake news stories online, and in the wrong hands, this could make things a whole lot worse.
He has me read some Times.
The time is now almost 12.
And then plugs my voice sample into a synthesizer. He's able to have me say whatever he types.
The time is now exactly 3:10 in the morning.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
So?
So seeing something with your own eyes or hearing it with your own ears doesn't mean it's trustworthy. What happens when convincing but false information triggers our biases?
In India, we have a very closely knit family setup. And even today, children are the primary asset in any family. You may be rich, you may be poor, you may be from a middle income group, but when it comes to the asset, the real asset of the family, even today it is the children.
In the South Indian village of Murki, news of a child kidnapping started to spread.
And the message was sent to the people living in that vicinity that I saw somebody who looks very suspicious. There is a possibility that he must be a kidnapper.
मैंने काम कर रहा था यहाँ पे तो जैसे फोन आया फोन आने के बाद ऐसा गाड़ी आ रही बच्चे पकड़े गाड़ी में लाल कलर का गाड़ी है.
They put out a message in the social media asking people to come and join. And within a fraction of few minutes, I think the whole village gathered.
काही लोक काय म्हणाले यांच्या गाडीमध्ये बंदूक आहे चाकू आहे तलवारी आहे असं आगाने पर्टिकुलरली मतलब टेबल हो तो यार खटकी यानो रोड में फिर दूर पटका
उसके ऊपर से आई गाड़ी स्लिप हो गई सर. गाड़ी ऊपर लाने के बाद सर गाड़ी पूरा क्रॉस गिर गई सर. उसके आदमी भी वो लोग जो अंदर 3 थे वो भी क्रॉस पड़े हुए थे सर. ऊपर से लोग फतरे ये लकड़ी से मार रहे सर. ऐसा लिए ऊपर ठहर के मार रहे सर.
A few hours away by road, Mohammed Osman was living with his wife and children.
जब उन्हें बच्चा था जब से मेरा उसके पढ़ाने का और उसको अच्छा एजुकेशन देने का एक दिल में एक मेरे वही था. मैं जो नहीं कर सका मेरे बच्चे करना. मोहम्मद आजम को थर्सडे फ्राइडे उनका ऑफ होता है.
It was my brother's weekend. My cousins and my brother, they decided to go to some other state just for fun. And there was one guy in the car who was from Qatar. There is a tradition in those countries. Whenever you see children, you give sweet to them.
बच्चे क्या करें उनके पेरेंट्स को जाके बोले कि हमको चॉकलेट्स. उनके पेरेंट्स ये समझे ये लोग बच्चों को किडनैप करने के लिए आए.
Things that men perceive as real are real in their consequences.
They started blaming my brother and my cousins, like, you are here to kidnap our children.
बोल के उन लोगों को फॉलो करते क्या करें पूरा व्हाट्सएप में पूरा वायरल करके तो रास्ते में 10 किलोमीटर जाने के बाद तो वो पूरा बेडशीटा कमना पूरा गाड़ी पे डाल के उन लोगों को झाड़ा काट के डाल के
They pulled my brother out of the car and they started hitting him.
सर हम नहीं सर. और अंदर बैठ के बोल रहा सर हम नहीं सॉरी हम नहीं. हम
उन्हें बोल रहा मैं किडनैपर नहीं हूँ. उतने में क्या हुआ आजम बोल रहा बता रहा मैं गूगल में काम करता हूँ, मैं सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर हूँ।
सर वो एक आदमी के पास से रस्सी लेके उसके गले में ऐसा बंध के कमर को बंध के उसको खींच के लेगा सर।
A perfectly innocent man, Muhammad Azam, was tied with a rope and dragged in the street.
अंदर बच्चे हैं, ये है सब डिक्की काट के देखे सर, अंदर डिक्की में कुछ भी नहीं निकला सर।
तो मेरा मोहम्मद आदम जो बच्चा मेरा बच्चा था ऑन द स्पॉट वहीं गुजर गया। हर पेरेंट्स का ख्वाब ये रहता कि हमारा बच्चा हमारा बच्चा वो काम नहीं करना।
ऐसा अफवाह था तो हम भी वही सोचे, मैसेज देने की वजह से उसका डेथ हो गया।
There was this one video which traveled all the way from Karachi in Pakistan. So this video was prepared just to tell the parents that, this is how a child is kidnapped. Watch the video and these are the precautions you are supposed to take. And now by the time this video found its way to India, it was doctored, it was edited.
The part that showed the child being returned with a cautionary message to parents was cut out. The clip that showed the child being taken spread virally.
Do you believe that video is real?
Yeah, I believe in this video.
People believe that yes, there is a child kidnapping gang, and this video claimed at least 45 lives. So now we are not only fighting the traditional crime, but we are also fighting a new age crime.
WhatsApp is encrypted, and so there is no information about how this data is being spread.
Who is the one who started spreading these things? We have no idea. So that is a major challenge for us.
Similar rumors about child kidnappers in the area have led to the killings of innocent people in Mexico, Indonesia, and in the United States.
We do have such an ingrained right to free speech in this country. Sometimes that's for better. I mean, most times as a journalist, I would say I love it.
I have a dream today.
But unfortunately, it does give some people some freedom to take advantage of others.
It's very difficult to limit free speech in a way that's fair, because you are then empowering some authority to decide what is good speech and what is bad speech. And there's almost no precedent of that ever working out. The freedom of press, of speech, and religion is the First Amendment to the US Constitution, because the only way to have an informed public is to have a free exchange of ideas and information. The first stages of all tyrannical governments is to go after the press. They vilify journalists, and they take this very important role that the media plays, and they begin to just push them out.
A journalist from New Jersey has been jailed in Nigeria.
That then allows them to go to the next step, which will be getting rid of their political enemies, consolidating power. And this has happened historically.
A prominent critic of Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been arrested.
Maria Ressa, an investigative journalist, attracted the ire of the Philippine government for her work exposing corruption.
The CIA concludes Saudi Crown Prince ordered Jamal Khashoggi's assassination, the Saudi journalist killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul.
Tyrannical regimes are threatened by a free and fair press. It's one of the most powerful tools of democracy, science, and progress. And learning how to utilize that tool is critical.
Just like we learn mathematics, chemistry, biology, sciences at school, we need to learn about the media.
I believed everything. Like, I literally would read something or I'd see something and I'd be like, well, they said it, so it must be true, right?
Today, we're going to talk about how we evaluate online sources. How do we figure out if we should trust these websites? Today's topic is going to be minimum wage. This link is asking you to evaluate this website for minimumwage.com.
One of the first things you should do is don't even read the article. You can come back to it. Figure out if you can trust these guys. We call it lateral reading. We want to get off the page we're on and open up a new tab and read laterally. See what other sites are saying about them, maybe check out their Wikipedia page to see have they any controversies, see what other fact checkers or fact checking groups have written about them. In a minute, you can get a quick lesson in like, oh, should I trust these guys or not?
So I'm gonna open up a search, and the first thing that I'm gonna search for is the Employment Policies Institute. So this one says, Corporate America's New Scam, Industry PR Firms. So I'm gonna click on this. How the media fell for the propagandist respectable sounding Employment Policies Institute. Now, if I scroll down a little bit more, who actually is funding this think tank? It's owned by a public relations firm. And in fact, they were sponsored by the restaurant industry.
You create groups that look like they are legitimate grassroots efforts that are actually the products of corporate and political interests that portray themselves as a groundswell of the common person.
So why would the restaurant industry sponsor a website that says minimum wage is bad?
Because business owners or restaurant owners, they don't want to pay their employees too much.
Absolutely, and the restaurants are sort of one of the key industries where we really see people working for minimum wage. They have put out numerous reports that increasing the minimum wage could be harmful, increasing poverty and unemployment. If I think about something like minimum wage, there's an election tomorrow. And what if there was something on the ballot about minimum wage? How might that impact me as a voter? That I might walk in and I might vote against something that I actually believe in, right? Or that I actually care about. So that becomes really important.
My job as a media literacy educator is not to get my students to think the way I think. It's to get them to think. It's to get them to ask questions and to say, how do I learn to be skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical? To use skepticism to our advantage is empowering because it just allows us to not just get suckered.
I think before that class, I was just not really thinking about like sourcing and like double fact checking and things like that. But after taking it, I realized that not everything I see is real.
The class really helped me become more aware of how I overuse the phone.
When I get home, I turn my phone off and I'll put it in my mom's room. Like I could just do my homework without, risking getting a notification or, having somebody text or call me. I know it's for the better and I've seen benefits from it.
The cell phone thing was one of the first things that we discussed, and we said the first bell to the last bell, no phones. They have to turn them off, put them in their backpack before they enter the building, and they're not out of their backpack and in use until they exit the building.
I went to a very big school, the first school I went to. Like everyone during lunch was just on their phone. And there was a lot less like laughing and talking. And like it was just normal for that. And I didn't know until I came here when there's a lot more social interaction. I like it a lot here.
That's when we saw another level of engagement, focus, kids laughing and talking to each other and communicating in ways that we hadn't seen before.
The use of technology at our school is really for educational purposes.
You can't even talk about academics until you start to reach your social potential. And so we started with the foundation of what does it mean to be respectful and listen to somebody with your eyes and your ears? What does it mean to be a person of integrity and speak with truth and facts? And so that's the foundation of the school.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our first 6th grade exhibition.
Nobody benefits by having phones inside of a school. There's a better way. Mountain Middle School went from being one of the lowest performing academic schools in the state of Colorado to consistently being one of the highest performing academic schools in Colorado over the last few years.
As we worked on this.
A lot of this happened so fast that not even the platforms and not even the search engines and the companies knew what was coming. Right now, the government is starting to pay attention. People are starting to question social media practices, business practices of search engines.
This is why we collaborated with people from the tech industry, because we want the engineers and the people who work at the companies to say, I don't want to do this if it's not okay, if it's disrupting democracy, if it's disrupting childhood development, if it's intentionally addicting kids or teens or even adults in our society. So I think what we're seeing is a sea change in attitudes now.
YouTube has fixed the flat earth teen girl anorexia problem and the anti-vaccine conspiracy issues. Those have been cranked down now.
But as much time as we're talking about how do we stop the bad guys, we need to be talking about how do we help the good guys. There are only few pockets of the internet where people are trying to produce true, trusted, objective information.
I don't have the time to figure out the truth of every single thing. I need to know that there are media companies who have a certain level of journalistic integrity. They put forth accurate, fair information.
Trustworthiness is everything. In our business, it's about information, and information has to be reliable to be considered useful. We will go into the field, conduct dozens of interviews. It can take days just the writing of the story. And then I'll share that with an editor who may spend several hours on it. Ask me, why didn't I ask this question? And I got to go back to the source and say, hey, will you tell me more about this subject? Or can you give me more documentation on this issue? And it could go to several editors, including the most senior editors at the paper. Often we spend weeks, even months, on a single story. But then we feel really good about it. We've checked it, we've analyzed it, it's fair.
Professional journalists and citizen journalists are our eyes and ears around the world. Without them, we would have almost no way of knowing what's going on.
The information that we do have...
Sometimes they risk and even lose their lives reporting the news.
This is the last tweet that Tim Hetherington sent before his death. In besieged Libyan city of Misrata, indiscriminate shelling by Gaddafi forces. No sign of NATO.
Being reminded of the sacrifices some journalists make helps even critics put things into perspective.
There are legitimate complaints about the bias of the mainstream media, and Lord knows I've made them over the years, but somehow, at some point, we went too far, and we delegitimized many of the fact-based media, and as a result, we destroyed folks' immunity to hoaxes and bad information.
The minute my story hits, those guys can read it. They're gonna see my work. They're gonna be able to see if they were quoted correctly. They can write to my editors. There is more transparency, more scrutiny than ever before. And that results in a higher degree of accuracy and fairness.
It's easy to think that human cultures are so diverse, our religions are so incompatible, that it'd be impossible to get all of humanity to agree on any moral principles. But for all the things that divide us, there are things that unite us by virtue of the fact that we are humans. We can all agree that life is better than death, that health is better than sickness, that abundance is better than want, that happiness is better than suffering.
My job is not to write about the thousands of planes that take off and land safely every day. That's not what I do, and that's not what people want to hear about. My job is to write about the one plane that takes off and blows up midair and kills 100 people.
Witnesses told us the plane missed the runway. It was about 150 feet, the crash site, away from where the runway ended.
If we write about these plane crashes, and this is just a metaphor for a disaster or a tragedy, if we write about them with some care and some intelligence and some analysis and some understanding, we're more likely to prevent the next one.
We're seeing those pictures, we're seeing that stuff, and turn on the news and everything is just how awful everything is.
Is the world getting better or worse?
Absolutely worse. I think we are in a crisis.
News is not a representation of normal life. I think that's a huge mistake.
There is a huge disconnect between the state of the world and what people know. The fact that we have lived through 50 years of shrinking poverty, shrinking child mortality, declining illness, an extraordinary period. Nobody has ever lived through a half century with the sort of improvements in human living standards that we've seen, and yet most people think the world is going wrong.
If no one gets killed, if there's no terrorist attack, no school shooting, then that school, that city isn't in the news.
You do not see a newspaper headline that says 192,000 people were lifted out of extreme poverty yesterday. That would be true, that newspaper headline, and it would be true today, and it would be true yesterday, and it would be true every day for the last 20 years. That's the rate at which people are leaving extreme poverty. But because it's so gradual, it never makes the news.
We are less likely to go to war. We have lower rates of murder. We abolished slavery. Violence against women has come down. The beating of children has decreased.
We're living in the least violent times of the human race, and it continues to decrease.
The way we see the world depends on the information we receive. But if so much positive information isn't considered newsworthy, it's likely that our view of the world is skewed towards the negative.
Progress is an empirical fact. It's happened, but it's not a natural process of the universe. Quite the contrary. Left to itself, things get worse. Things fall apart. There are many more ways for things to go wrong than for things to go right. There are certain overarching ideas that when they are formulated, propagated, spread, accepted, they can allow us to solve problems. The idea of reason, that we should set aside tradition and superstition and dogma and realize that it's only by subjecting ideas to analysis, to argument, that we can solve our problems, therefore to make us better off. There are no shortage of severe problems in our institutions, but if we are mindful of how much worse things were in the past, how much worse they could get today, then we can build on the progress that we've achieved and strive for continuing progress.
Yeah, there are problems in the world. Some of them are bad. One or two of them are getting worse, but an awful lot of them are getting better. And do you know the reason they're getting better is because people like you got out of their chair and got on with trying to solve them.
With wildfires spreading, so are the stories of incredible bravery.
But as the waters rose, so did a makeshift citizens' armada. Strangers risking life and limb, saving strangers.
A sense of purpose reigns supreme. Out of one disaster, many at the ready, doing whatever it takes.
Exposure to other people trains our brains to think, well, what would it be like for me to be that person? So that's what the global community that the internet has provided, first radio, then television, now the internet, of I now know what it looks like to be you.
Sharing our stories helps us understand how connected we all are as a human race. And it helps us understand that we're all in this together.
At a rally in Dallas, Texas that was supported by Russian internet trolls, protesters, counter-protesters, and the police overcame their differences to find common ground.
Truth always exists. There are, of course, threats to truth from propaganda, from lies, from conspiracy theories, from human ignorance. And it's only by checks and balances, open debate and criticism that we can winnow out falsehoods and try to approach the truth.
Because of our psychological biases and the way media gets filtered, it's easy to misunderstand what everyday people feel towards each other.
My end goal in life is to leave it better than I found it, or at least leave somebody a little better than they were.
Just like John Lennon, I want everyone to love and be happy.
I wish for you to do what makes you happy.
I wish for you to be happy, to be healthy and prosperous, to find your true self.
Love, encouragement.
I wish you wisdom.
Compassion.
Honesty, friendship, family.
And I wish you lots and lots of love.
We all know this life ain't no easy road. We all know sometimes you're stuck with a heavy load. We all know it's hard to tell what to believe. We all know better to give than receive. We're all in this thing together. Every day we're each put to the test. Can't get far without each other. So help your brother to a little bit of happiness.